Should you actually take the time to learn container nodes, or you can basically use no containers and position your UI nodes manually? This is the question that we are going to be addressing in this video. So for the most cases that are basic, okay, you can technically avoid using a container nodes. If you're just a starter, you are creating a project that it's not going to be published, it's just for yourself, for learning, it is technically okay to just grab there a control node and position it using the move tool or whatever. It's going to be okay. Now the problem with this is that it's not, firstly, two problems actually. It is not expandable because, for example, here in the buttons, okay, if I wanted to add a fourth one, okay, I would have to put it like right here, for example. I would have to select all of them and then maybe try to center them like this. This would be one method, but of course, whenever you want to, let's say, oh no, I don't want this button anymore, I have to select the three of them and position them again. And then the other problem is that it is not mathematical, the separation between them. So for example, the separation from this button to this button, okay, is 43, okay, and the separation between these two is basically 38. So it's not mathematically correct, that separation. And the same thing with this label over here. Here we have a separation of 39, and here we have a separation of 51. Okay, so once again, it's not mathematically correct. And in containers, everything is different, okay, because everything is like perfectly mathematically calculated to make sure that all distances are the same ones. So for example, I have here a container of buttons and all their distances, okay, are something like 39, 40, okay, and actually I have set this value over here to be 40 exactly. And for example, here in this score label, by using a margin container, you can see how this is done. So here I have this score and I can measure it over there. It's something like 19 or 20, and here it is once again 20, and once again I have manually set this value over here. And as you can see, using these nodes is super simple. You just have to add them inside of the control node, set some stuff in the theme overrides, for example, like this, and the same thing with the VBox container, and you have it, okay? So for the most cases in which you are creating a game that is just for yourself, for learning purposes, you can just use no control nodes and position things manually. But whenever you want to create something more serious, maybe something that you want to release or anything like that, always use a VBox container. Or well, VBox container or any kind of container that you may need to use. Because we already saw how expandable they are. For example, if I wanted to add more buttons over here, I can quickly do that. If I want to change the separation, I can quickly do that, etc. And this really saves up a lot of time, as you saw, because, well, technically you can center this manually, okay, and make sure that their separation is all the same one. For example, let me copy the position of this button over here and I will paste it right over there, and I will decrease it by, let's say, 50, okay, or maybe a little bit more, maybe let's put 100, okay. And then in this other button I will paste this position over there and I will increase it by 100. So right there it is mathematically correct, okay, the separation is the exact same one. Oh, but what happens is that if I want to add a fourth button, how do I center everything? I want to go over the calculations over again, maybe create a brand new calculation, and if I want to put it manually, okay, as you can see, it's going to be a mess to actually match exactly 100 units, okay, so it's not the best practice. So yes, indeed, containers allow this to be expandable, and also it allows you to avoid having to mathematically calculate positions. Instead of doing some maths, it is much easier to just learn how to use these containers. That is super simple. I will add a new user interface node, basically a control node, for example. And to demonstrate how you do this, for example, when you look for container, you find a lot of them. But probably the most used ones, at least in the most cases, are Hbox and Bbox container, basically vertical and horizontal container, and also margin containers, the one that we saw for the score, and also maybe also center container for some more specific usages. Also the grid, this is basically a grid, combines both vertical and horizontal containers. So let's start off with using a Vbox container, and I will add a button over here, and let's make this a little bit bigger, maybe something like this. As you can see, now the buttons are not, they don't have like a pretty good size, so I will just duplicate this button 3 more times. But we do see the separation here. They have a standard separation, but if we enable this property, they are stick together. I can put this to something like, I don't know, 30, and I can put their alignment to the center or to the end if I wanted. Okay, so like this is going to work fine. But well, now we have the problem that the button size is a little bit incorrect. As you can see, by default, the buttons will follow the container size. Check how I'm modifying the container width, and all the buttons are modifying its width. But well, the height is not being modified. So how can we modify the height of these buttons? So basically, we can go to the layout, custom minimum size, and let's say that the minimum size of the X is going to be something like 300, and the minimum Y is going to be, I don't know, 100. Okay, so right there, the size of my button, at least the Y size has been modified. And if you actually go to container sizing, what we see over there is that we have horizontal and vertical. I will go super quickly, okay, because horizontal here is set to fill. So this means that it will actually just follow the horizontal. But as you can see now, I cannot make it smaller than the units that I have selected, in this case 300. If I make this, I don't know, 50, now the container can be a little smaller. So this is for you to know, but I will set this back to 300. But if we put, for example, shrink begin, and I make the container bigger, well, right now I am there actually modifying the size. But now my button is not centered in the container, so usually what you would use is shrink center for these cases, okay? Or you can also use shrink end, but well, I will just leave it in shrink center. And finally, with vertical, you have the exact same options that work in the exact same way, but you also have the fill. So this will basically try to fill up the entire vertical space that is available. Also, another note that I will quickly go over is the grid. Okay, this works quite similarly. So I have there the grid. I will add up some buttons. Let's add 4. I will move this to the bottom left. So there I have my grid. Well, let's say, because I have only set this to have 1 column, let's set this to 2, and there we have it. And now we have here my buttons. And what if I want to make this bigger? I will select, well, I think that actually if we go to theme overrides, well, we can firstly set the horizontal and vertical separation. Let's say 20. There we have it. And now I can select all of my buttons. I can go to layout, and I'm going to open up container sizing, and now here I have some different options: expand, shrink center. Well, these are the same ones, but are displayed differently, actually, because I have selected like multiple nodes. So once again, we can select, for example, here expand, and this will try to take the whole space that is available. So if I make this grid a little bit bigger, okay, it is taking horizontally the whole space that is available. And then if I do this exact same thing but in vertical, there we will have some kinds of grid, but probably what you want to set your custom size. So let's say that 64 by 64. So there we actually have it. Again, with these options, we are going to actually allow the container to work properly. Now note that I can actually resize everything like this, so this shouldn't be like that. So I will disable expand so that things do not change, well, that do not expand with the container. So actually here in the container sizing, we can just disable here fill. Okay, and now when I resize this, I don't have anything that is not working as it should. So well, there you have how you can use the most used types of containers. And finally, the margin container. This is the simplest one. I will put it on the top right. And for example, let's say that you have here a label. Okay, and I have here a score of 0. So there we have it. There I have my score label. And if I want to separate this, I would just go to theme overrides constant, and let's add a margin top of 40 units and a margin right, I believe it's going to be of another 40 units. So there I have my score label actually separated 40 units from the right and 40 units from the top. Okay, so it is quite useful as well. So yes, indeed, in mostly every single case, you should try to use container nodes if what you look for is, first of all, to learn the engine a little bit more. We can add that at the third point. But well, if you are actually creating a prototype, something for yourself, something to learn, you can avoid using container nodes if you don't really want to, but it's always a good practice to use them because they allow you to easily expand your game, okay, and change the different constants quite easily. And well, you avoid having to do manual maths that probably you hate. So well, this is all for this video. If you want more Godot tutorials, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one, and bye bye.